right, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this check-in session. My name is Mumshad and Michael, and I'm with Michael Forrester, and we'll be your host for today. Hey. So this is the 12th of Feb, and we are doing the bi-weekly cohort check-in sessions. And this week, we decided that we're going to be looking at the new AWS AI Practitioner certification cohort that we recently started in the beginning of Jan. So we have a couple hundred students that are going through. Michael is leading the cohort, and we thought this would be a good session to review the progress and go through some questions of the exam, some gotchas. So stay tuned. We have a great session coming up for you. Right. So let me just share my screen. And so here's what we have today. So by the way, we have the free week that's happening at KodeKloud, so do check it out. If you haven't been to the platform recently, this is your chance to explore all the new fun stuff that we have, all the new courses and features and the AI tutor and all the AI-based solutions that we have right now. So definitely check it out. We'll also celebrate some of the recent graduates, some of the recent folks who got certified on Kubernetes and other certifications. We'll share a little bit of updates on the new courses and updates that are coming on the platform. And we'll look at the progress, and we'll start looking into some of the AI practitioner practice questions. All right, so yeah, we have the free learning week that's happening this week. So that's it's already started a couple of days back on the 10th, and it's up all the way till the 17th. Lots of almost the entire platform is free, so you can check out 150 plus courses on the platform, check out the labs. So if you haven't been on the platform recently, this is the time to check it out.
Yeah, a whole week of just free learning. Go for it.
Yeah. All right. By the way, if you're here, do send a message in the chat, and of course, if you have any questions, let us know where you are, who you are, where you're coming, where you're joining us from, if you have any questions along the way, drop them here, and we'll pick them one by one and get them answered. I do see a couple of folks here. We have Rishi. We have Josh Blair with a question: is there a different cohort check-in for the AI practitioner? No, so we decided that we're going to be rotating these check-in sessions every other week. So this week is the AI practitioner, and 2 weeks later we'll be doing the Kubernetes, the Kubestronaut check-in sessions. And we have a question from Marius: best path in terms of cert to follow, what to start first. So I will share some of the recommendations when we look into the Kubestronaut check-in sessions. We have a list of paths that we've defined. So I'm going to be sharing that. If someone said hello, and we have Muhammad from Somalia. Hi, hello.
Hi.
All right, so let's just keep going. And yes, do let us know where you're from in the chat. So let's start with, so we've got some animations this time, some confetti. So we have some of the new Kubernetes Kubestronaut rock stars. So we have Maitreya Kasturi, Mohit Pans, and Antonio Luzzi, who's recently completed their CKAD and CKS certifications. So congratulations. And we have Joaquin, who's completed the CKS, Aravindan, who's done the CKA. We have Nagananda, who's recently become a Kubestronaut. So congratulations to all. We have Hamdi, who has completed the CKAD certification, Ashish, who's also done the CKAD certification, and Timur, who's recently become a golden Kubestronaut. So congratulations to everyone. So Michael, one of the trend I see is that around this time of the year, so Jan, Feb, there's a lot of certifications. a lot of people becoming Kubestronauts and golden Kubestronaut. I'm guessing probably related to the the cohorts and sessions we started earlier in the year, especially last year around the same time. We started the year-long cohort sessions for Kubestronaut and golden Kubestronaut. So we're able to see a lot of people who are recently completed the certifications.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also, I remember early on, before they converted it to lifetime access, that they actually gave you 2 years plus the next January 1st before you could get recertified. Of course, that's kind of moot now since it's a lifetime access. But does that still apply to Kubestronaut, or is it just like when it expires, right? Do you know? I don't think I remember, actually.
Yeah, so it expires, and you have to renew the certs to keep your Kubestronaut status active. But I don't think that's the case for golden Kubestronaut. I think for golden Kubestronaut, once you're a golden Kubestronaut, you're
it for life, right?
Yeah.
Is
that
good
the same for AWS?
So for AWS, oddly enough, typically they last 2 or 3 years. I think they upped it just recently to 3 years, but it depends on the certification. Typically within every 2 years, you're going to end up recertifying against your exam.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's been some rumblings about going longer.
The AWS, the golden jacket, does that need you to be?
Yeah, the golden jacket is not lifetime access. You actually have to renew your certifications continuously. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Although, just to say this, and I'm not diminishing the AWS exams, since most of them are knowledge-based exams and not performance-based exams, they're still super hard and still an incredible achievement. The level of effort, though, compared to, say, going for golden Kubestronaut is a little less, just because you don't have to memorize a bunch of commands on the command line like you do for the golden Kubestronaut. Plus, 12 certifications versus 15. I mean, right? It's a big difference.
Yeah. I think the golden Kubestronaut is now 15 or close to 15.
Yeah, I think it's 15, especially with CNPE thrown in there, right? The cloud platform native engineer, the non-associates platform engineering one.
Yep. Cool. Let's proceed. So we have Luca Banzato, who's also recently become a golden Kubestronaut. So congratulations, Luca. Pretty impressive. And then let's look at some of the other certifications. So Dennis recently completed the Certified Backstage Associate certification. We have Costin Cabello, who's recently completed the LFCS certification. Osher, who's recently completed the AWS Certified Solutions Architect Associate certification. Aditya, who's recently completed the Certified Argo Project Associate certification. George Milios, who's recently completed the AWS Certified Solutions Architect Professional certification. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's great.
Awesome. Congratulations to everyone. So, by the way, if you are in Europe, or if you plan to be in Europe, Amsterdam, in the end of March, do come to the register for and come to the KubeCon Europe. So it's in Amsterdam from 23rd to 26th March. As you know, it's pretty action-packed every time. And we're going to be there. We have a booth, and so I'll be there. Michael is going to be there. Michael, are you all set for the travel?
I'm set. I'm ready to go. Actually, I'm practically already there. It just feels like it's just a few days away.
Yeah, very interesting. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. I think the last time we were in London last year, and then we were in India, and this time it's gonna be Amsterdam. So yeah, very excited and looking forward to it.
And you and I are giving a talk together about how to navigate the perils of keeping up with the Kubernetes special interest group, Kubernetes as a whole, how they do release cycles. We're going to give a quick 20-minute talk about how to navigate all that as someone on the outside of the system, right? So yeah, if you ever want to know, like, how does Kubernetes do releases? How do they get ratified? How do like special interest group work? Because I think a lot of you are familiar that Gateway API is actually a special interest group. It's not actually core to Kubernetes, but it's actually in the exam now. If you want to know how all that functions, Mumshad and I are actually going to give a talk in the theater that you guys can see if you want to come and learn how all that functions. And that's just one of many talks that KodeKloud's given while we're there. So
yeah. So we're going to be there. We have at least 3 talks confirmed right now. So we have Norhan delivering a talk. We have Abhinav delivering a talk, and we have me and Michael combined delivering a talk. So if you're there, do register for our sessions and meet us during the talks.
Yeah, and we're talking about platform engineering, basically, how to navigate Kubernetes updates and stay recent with that. And Noran is talking about kind of the latest around what the chain looks like if you're going to deliver machine learning models and AI models and LLMs into production, what that looks like from a CNCF perspective. So it's going to be some cool topics.
Awesome. Cool. Let's move on to some of the new courses that are going to be out in the platform. Again, it's all open right now, so this is the right time for you to check in on these courses. So we have the Google ADK course by Jeremy Morgan. So ADK, is getting really popular. Google's framework for building AI agents. So definitely check that out. And then we have some of the lab-only or learn by doing courses. So there's Core DNS fundamentals, cross-plane, building AI agents with Claude by Sai. So these are really interesting hands-on courses where you're just like learning by doing. So definitely check these out, as well as the learn by doing Rancher fundamentals by Reham. So a bunch of new courses that are out there. Definitely check these out. And then we have a few courses that are coming. They're going to be coming soon. So we have the K Agents, hosting AI agents on Kubernetes, the AWS DevOps Professional Certification course by Michael. That's something we've been waiting for, Michael. Where are you with it? Like, when can we expect it?
Oh yeah, pretty much everything is now in post-production. So we're just doing the polishing, finishing touches, and so hopefully within the next maybe month at the most, could be less.
Yeah, awesome. Really looking forward to that one. I think that's probably one of the most requested courses on our platform.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, because I would say that out of all of the certifications that AWS has, that is by far the largest and most comprehensive in terms of the amount of knowledge that it covers. So yeah, and right in our wheelhouse, right? This is DevOps, pure DevOps. So
yeah, awesome, pretty cool. And lastly, we have the data structures and algorithm by Alan. So we have these fundamental, this list of foundational courses that are being built over the past year, and this is an addition into that. So definitely check it out. All right, just going over the Kubestronaut cohort. So just to answer the question that was asked earlier, there are a couple of paths that were defined. So one is the first one, which can't see there, but it's basically the CKA, CKAD, CKS, and then the KCNA, and then the KCSA. And then the second path was basically KCNA, start with KCNA, and then do the CKAD, CKS, and then CKA. Yeah, I think, so if, this is not the path, this is basically just showing the different cohorts. All right. But so the recommendation is, if you're absolutely new to Kubernetes and you do not have any hands-on experience, then it's best to maybe start with the KCNA, which is probably the easiest of all. And then once you gain enough confidence, aim for CKAD, which is comparatively has lesser topics compared to CKA, but it's a hands-on exam. So you get some hands-on exposure there, and then eventually work your way up to CKA, CKS, and the others. If you already have some experience working with Kubernetes, then I would highly recommend just starting with the CKA, and that covers a lot, and then everything else becomes very easy. CKAD, KCNA, and others become really easy.
Yeah, definitely save CKS for last, though.
Yeah,
that is typically our recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and we also have the before we get into this, there's the cohorts are available at cohorts.kokloud.com. So if you go to cohorts.kokloud.com, you can see the AI Practitioner, Golden Kubestronaut, and Kubestronaut cohorts. So the you can see that yeah, there's about 800 people going through the January 2026 cohort, and I believe yeah, the applications are still on. So if you haven't joined a cohort yet, you can just go here and join these cohorts. And then we have the Golden Kubestronaut cohort. There's about 200 plus that's going through the January cohort. And then you have the AI Practitioner. There's about 240 plus that are going through the AI Practitioner cohort. So basically, as you go through and progress through your courses, you'll be able to see the progress here, and you this is kind of the leaderboard that's based on the progress of your courses. And once you complete it, you're going to be here. Once you get the certification, add your certification here, and you'll be listed here as part of those who've got certified. So definitely check that out. But for now, we're just going to shift gears, and Michael is going to walk us through the AI Practitioner. Maybe Michael, walk us through why AI, why the AWS AI Practitioner? Why should someone go for it?
Yeah, I actually, and I think the answer to that is probably relevant to a question that I think there's a user who ends in sysint9, starts with a GW032, who asked, in today's competitive exams where AI is advancing and cloud alone isn't basically sufficient, right? And I would say that that's probably true, but every new technology builds on the previous technologies, right? So cloud has been here since 2006. Kubernetes has been around since 2014, 2015 when it started hitting stride. And then, we have platform engineering, and now we've got AI. And all of that sits on previous technologies. I say that not because I want to inflate or, make cloud bigger than it is, but cloud isn't going anywhere. So to answer your question, why then AWS AI Practitioner? Why then would that be relevant? Well, honestly, it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get cloud, right? So the hyperscalers like AWS and Azure and Google are not going anywhere. And they are still the premier place that most people host their infrastructures. And so by taking AWS AI Practitioner, you get not only some knowledge about the cloud, but you get knowledge about how AWS handles AI in the cloud, like how they think about it. But also, just to say this, is that since it is a fundamental exam, the other why to do it, not more than just cloud and more than just the fact that it's AI, is that it does actually force you to study fundamentals. So you learn the basics of machine learning, you learn the basics of AI. And I'm going to run through the domains in a second so we can talk about specifically about what it covers. But that's really the why, is that it's kind of the intersection of two really good worlds. You get basically cloud and you get AI, and you get to bring them together. And this is the place to start for anybody who wants to follow an AI path on AWS. So the answer to the question, how do you, keep up with this where cloud alone isn't enough and AI is advancing? This is one of those ways that in the context of particularly AWS, you can stay relevant around the AI conversation. Because after this, just so we're aware, there is machine learning associates, and then AWS just released a generative AI developer professional exam, which we are currently in development for. And so that's actually going to be one of the peak exams that we've seen. And one of the, kind of matches what we've seen with Azure, Google, and now AWS, is that they are investing heavily in making sure that people know that cloud is the place in which AI can be run and will be run. So to answer that question, this is a great place to start. You get the best. Start here, start fundamental, learn the fundamentals of AI, learn some fundamentals around AWS, bring them together.
Okay, so just to dig into that a little bit more, say I'm a developer or infrastructure engineer. I kind of know. I work on the cloud all the time. I've used ChatGPT and some of the new AI, tools out there, and I've used OpenAI, and I kind of know how to maybe use AI within an IDE. So I know how to use Cursor and kind of get my ISC files and the Kubernetes pods and files and everything, definition files and all of that built. I know a little bit of models, the different types of models, and what's a good model and what's what's not so good, what's costly and what's cheap. So beyond that, what are some of the if I know all of that, and what are the things that I'm missing? You say foundations, right? What are those kind of foundations that I might be missing that I would have to learn from a course like an AI practitioner preparation or something?
Well, I have to say it's probably a good time for me to segue into the exam guide so we can talk about what specifically covers, right? So with that in mind, let's see, screen sharing working? No.
Yep.
Oh, there it is. We got the infinity, right? So okay,
Yeah.
let's try it again. All right. So this is actually the new format for domain exam guides in AWS. It used to be, by the way, a PDF that you could just download, and you can still download it as a PDF. But just so anybody who is like, wait, Michael, where are we? We're actually at a web page on AWS's website because they converted off of static PDF files, and now every single exam they have is now actually on a single website. So if you notice, we're actually underneath the AWS Certified AI Practitioner section. To answer your question, so you just, Mumshad, you just mentioned a bunch of stuff, like a bunch of operational pieces, like I know how to do, deploy, I know how to monitor, pieces like that. So then what would the AI Fundamentals Practitioner exam, what would that add from a knowledge perspective? So it does actually cover a bunch of domains, and we'll go over the rest of this in just a second. But just know there are a number of domains that are important here. Basically, these 5 domains form the core of the exam. And the thing that's interesting is that 2 of the domains, about 44% of the exam, is actually just fundamentals. So fundamentals of AI and ML, so you learn things like what's the difference between supervised and unsupervised learning. You learn basically what neural networks are. And again, you're not expected to be a data scientist. You're expected to just understand the fundamental concepts that underpin both machine learning, since we've been doing that for a while, and now AI, at a fundamental level. The second domain covers generative AI specifically. And so it starts talking about what GPTs are, like how and why that has been such a transformative concept when it comes to large language models, or understanding, how like a little bit of the metrics and the math works, and how do we take data and identify patterns and then derive amazing information from these patterns. And so that's really what domain 1 and 2 cover. Domain 3 talk about models that AWS has that are considered kind of core or foundation, and how to apply these models in different contexts. And then the last 2 sections, domains 4 and 5, actually talk about basically security and responsible AI. And it's a full 28% of the exam. It's really honestly about security and responsible security. Now, all of this content is what you will be studying to pass. And these are all multiple choice questions, although there are, there's some matching and some ordering, which we'll talk about in just a second. But this is the content that's covered. And we can go through that in detail in just a moment. So like we can dive into like the task statements and pieces like that. But that's the basic overview of what this looks like. So hopefully that answers your question about what we'll be studying.
Yeah. Yes. Still not sure about the why, right? Like say if you go into maybe the first part, right? Fundamentals of AI and ML. Like, well, why should I learn that?
So I want to kind of throw this statement out there because I think sometimes we think of this as a different beast. Like we think of software as LLMs, like hosting machine learning models. We think of these as kind of something completely new to us as operators. And it is actually something new. But it's really just another piece of software somewhere. Like I like infrastructure that's really boring and very simple. And we have lots of new words to describe old things. Like RAG is really honestly just a form of caching or maybe a database, right? And so what we're doing here is we're basically learning what these concepts are so that we as operators can know how to monitor, deploy them, troubleshoot them, fix them, right? Deploy, we like all the things that we do as operators. And so this is very useful because the more you know about the basic concepts around both AI and machine learning, as well as generative AI, the easier it's going to be for you to deploy something, to configure it, to kind of be on the guard, for security, and how to do things like scale it, right, or recover it, or fix it, or support it. And so in this particular case, like knowing the basic concepts, especially things like the machine learning development lifecycle, will help you know when you should use AI and when you shouldn't. Or knowing, for example, when a data scientist comes to you and says, hey, I went to do something on S3 for data collection, and it really messed up my lifecycle, so I couldn't get to pre-processing and I couldn't get to feature engineering. You kind of learn what all of that is. And you learn a little bit about like how we train models or how we fine tune models and all these words that we throw around generative AI that this really cements your understanding of how they function and what they mean. And this includes things like metrics, like you can even see down here, for example, that, we've got area under the curve, or F1 score, which is the synthesis of precision and recall. And it's like, you get to understand what those metrics mean and what they mean for you as the operator when you have to go support and troubleshoot these models. And so that's the biggest why, at least from a DevOps perspective. But I would argue as a developer, as an architect, as an operator, especially obviously as a data scientist, you really want to know how these things function so that you can support it. That's the main thing.
Yeah, awesome. So so far, like what we've been doing, say as infrastructure engineers, operators, we've been responsible for building infrastructure, managing it, maintaining it, configuring security, and all of that. We had some idea about the software that we're running on them. And especially if I was more like an architect, then probably that's when I would have asked a lot of questions around like, what size of like disk you need, or what type of workload is there. Depending on that, I could configure and architect the right solution. But now a lot of it, so you have the container orchestration layer. So now we have servers and we have Kubernetes and all of that. But then what runs on them is all the machine learning workloads, the models, and the fine tunings that happen, the data side of it, the trainings that happen. And if I need to understand how to build my infrastructure for this workload, then it's important for me to understand this software, which is the new software, which is everything that's got to do with AI and machine learning primarily, so that I can build the right I can design, and I can build and maintain the right infrastructure for it.
Yeah, exactly right. When we have enough information and context, then it tends to make managing that thing a lot easier.
Yeah, awesome.
So I do want to mention that this exam, since it is a fundamental exam, is 65 questions and it's 90 minutes. And they do have a recommendation that you understand at least core services around AWS, that you understand things like the shared responsibility model and some of the service pricing models. They're not going to ask you to do anything advanced. So no coding, no data engineering, no data science, no operational stuff really. And they're not even really going to ask you about implementing security. They're going to ask you, do you understand some of the base security concerns around AI? So in addition, questions are come in 4 types, and this is relatively new for AWS. They've always had multiple choice and multiple response, but also sometimes they'll say, hey, I've got these 4 tasks. Can you choose the order by which they should be done? So they'll do that, like 3 to 5 responses. They'll basically say, hey, can you tell me which one should go first and which one should go second, which one should go third? There's not a whole lot of those on the exam. I've taken it twice, and you don't see a whole lot of them, but they are there. So somewhere between, I would say, 3 to 5 are going to be ordering questions. And then matching is kind of the same thing, where you're going to match a list of like items on one side and a list of items on the other side, and you're going to drag them basically. And sometimes it's a drop-down box. Initially, it was a drop-down box. I think I saw a drag the last time I saw it. And you're basically going to match left side with right side. And so they're going to do some matching. So there's not a lot of those either. Probably, again, in aggregate, easily less than 10 of the ordering and matching questions. The vast majority of the questions are multiple choice, where you've got 1 correct response and 3 kind of distractors, if you will. Or they're multiple response, which also is fewer, where you've got 5 answers and 2 of them are correct, and you got to select the correct 2. So, and by the way, they tell you things like 15 unscored questions that don't affect your score. Just know that you're not going to know which of the 65 questions is the 15. So you just have to study as if you have to pass all 65 questions. It does require only a 70 to pass, or 700 out of 1,000. So it's not a high bar per se to get it. But I will say that you are answering 65 questions that are about the topic at hand. So just know that it's not set to like 95 or anything like that.
So the unscored content, the unscored questions, if you get it right, doesn't matter, or get it wrong, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, but I think knowing that some of the questions are unscored is psychologically important, and here's why. I actually got recertified a couple of years ago. Actually, I recertified this year, but it was my last take for the machine learning specialty exam, which, by the way, just in people are aware, that's retiring. So the machine learning specialty exam is retiring at the end of March. They're replacing it with their new generative AI developer exam. But to answer your question about unscored questions, the reason it's important to know about unscored questions is that I remember taking the machine learning exam, the specialty exam, and the first 5 questions, I could not, I was like, I literally have no idea. And you might think, oh, well, that's probably like, maybe you run into questions that you don't know the answers for. I'm pretty good about the topic of AWS. And so it's rare for me to have zero idea about a service or something around AWS. And so the first 5 questions I got completely and utterly wrong. And I was like, and I could tell because I didn't know anything about the question that was being asked. I was like, is that even a service? Does that exist? So just know that sometimes you're going to get wacky questions on the exam that are going to kind of throw you off. And while you definitely want to do your best, if you're like, I don't even know if it's a service. I've never even seen this before. Is that even a well-formed question? Just know that AWS does throw in questions that they're just testing to see how people do. So don't get defeated if you get a series of questions that just don't make any sense based on what you've studied. Sometimes, AWS is just testing to see if something is there. You just do your best at every single question, but don't get disheartened if you get asked a bunch of questions where you're kind of like, well, I don't even know that this was in scope, or I don't remember that being on. Don't let that psychologically throw you off. You just do the best you can for the questions you have. And do know, though, that I have run into that where it's like, wait, this was on the exam. I don't even remember this being in the exam guide. And so just know that if you run into that, just do your best and move on, because some wacky questions can show up actually on the exam. I've seen it.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So just basically testing your mental strength or something. Just trying to throw you off during the exam.
I don't think they're trying to. I think they're actually trying to see if someone who passes the exam would actually get this question right. Right. So they're testing to see if the health of the question is something that should be in the exam as a testable question. And so, I used to work for training and certification for AWS. So I know that their methodology is they're not trying to mess with test takers. It does mess with test takers, though. And what they're trying to do is just find out if this question could be on the exam. Would someone who knows how to pass the exam, would they get it right? That's what they're testing. So.
Okay.
It is worth mentioning, I think someone asked about the scope of services that are in the exam. And I just want to mention is that there are a lot of services that are in scope for the exam, and we could run through the whole list if you wanted to. I just want to say this, though, and I think this makes this very simple and very easy. The primary 2 services that they are going to ask you about on the exam is AWS Bedrock and AWS SageMaker. They're going to ask you primarily about these 2 services, Bedrock and SageMaker. Those are really the 2 services that govern both machine learning and generative AI on AWS. And here's the tricky part. Both Bedrock and SageMaker have a bunch of subservices underneath them. So it's not just, oh, we're going to use Bedrock. It's like, we're going to use Bedrock guardrails, or we're going to use Bedrock agents, or we're going to use Bedrock knowledge base. So there's all of these subservices. So as you study for the exam, I would probably guess that when it comes to from a services standpoint, you're going to spend 80% of your time learning just what is guardrails for Bedrock, what is ground truth for SageMaker. You're going to learn about all of the subservices that make up Bedrock and SageMaker, and that's going to be your primary focus. Don't get me wrong. They're going to ask you questions about very basic questions about S3. They're going to ask you very basic questions about the EC2 virtual machine service. But mainly, it's just Bedrock and SageMaker as the 2 primary things that they're going to ask you from a services perspective on. And so most of that will show up in Domain 3 in the applications of foundational models. So that's where you'll see most of it.
Cool. Can you give us like a 1-minute breakdown of what these 2 service families are, or the difference between the 2?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bedrock mainly governs the hosting, the feature set, and the management of basically models. So LLMs mainly in today's parlance. So if you want to host an open source model like Llama, you want to put that in there, you can. You want to put Mistral in there, you can. If you want to host Claude, like you want Opus 4.6, you can put that into Bedrock. So Bedrock is really all about everything to do with kind of, I don't want to have to mess with all the details. I'm not training a model. All I want to do is I just want to stand up a model and have it run. And I want guardrails like security. I want detection. I want to be able to detect bias and other problems. That's what Bedrock does. Bedrock's main job is just to make it as easy as possible to host and kind of put models into production. That's Bedrock. SageMaker has a bunch of, SageMaker Studio, AI Studio, it's got a bunch of pieces to it that help a data scientist or machine learning or a developer train or fine tune models. So think of SageMaker as the place that you make machine learning and Gen AI models, and think of Bedrock as the place where you host them. Now, I will say this, SageMaker can host models, so don't be exclusive around that, but mainly SageMaker is used to make models, to tune them, to assess them. It's also used for data preparation and exploratory data analysis. But everything about the machine learning lifecycle that creates models, that's where SageMaker sings. Bedrock's main function is just to make it as easy as possible to host models. So there's a very clear line about what they can do. Like you wouldn't, for example, train a model on Bedrock. You would probably do it in SageMaker. You wouldn't take data and kind of look at the data and explore it and see what you could derive from the data. That would happen on SageMaker. You wouldn't do that on Bedrock. If you wanted to host a production model and run it at scale and you didn't want to generate it from scratch, that would be Bedrock. If you're like, oh, I want to build a model and test it and be responsible for all of the details around hosting it, you could do that in SageMaker. But again, most people don't do that. SageMaker is where you build and you create. Bedrock is where you deploy and you host when it comes to basically machine learning and AI models.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes it very clear. And so you're saying this entire certification is based on these two?
It's mainly those two services. That's what it's all about. And oddly enough, as you go up the chain in certifications from this foundational certification into associates and into professional, it remains mainly about those two services. So Bedrock and SageMaker.
Yeah.
Good. So probably useful for us to maybe do a few practice exams in the time that we have left, like maybe take a look at a few questions just to show.
Yeah.
I left it here on purpose so that everyone can see there's 5 domains here in the exam. So again, 65 questions, 90 minutes, don't forget. I think AWS currently is charging $100 USD for the exam, just to be aware of that. If you've taken, by the way, any other AWS exam before, they will give you a coupon to get 50% off. So if you've taken Cloud Practitioner or any other exam, just know you probably have a coupon for a discount inside of your training account. So just know that if you have any other exam under your belt, you can use that to discount the AI Practitioner exam. I highly recommend that. So this is our course for the AWS Certified AI Practitioner. And I only show this because I want you to see that we actually match the domains explicitly that are in the domain guide. So you'll notice that we have fundamentals of AI and ML, generative AI, application of models, guidelines for responsible AI, and the entire security section here as well. Of course, we have an opening and a conclusion. Now, one thing also that we have is notice that we have basically mock exams, which we call assessments in some of our courses. And notice that there's 2 easy ones and there's 2 hard ones. So I'm just going to run through a question or 2 just to give you a sample of what we're talking about. And I'll start with easy and then I'll roll over to a hard. How does that sound?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So notice the guide bar on the left-hand side, which we can, of course, shrink if we want to. But here we are. And I just want to mention that this is the easy version of the exam. So you might think that these are kind of gimmies, but just know that they do actually ask you relatively simple questions on the AWS AI Practitioner exam. It's not complex scenarios. This is not DevOps Professional. This is not Solutions Architect Associates. These are much more simple questions. Don't worry, they do ask they do ramp it up, but a lot of the questions look like this, where it's like, okay, which 2 features should we, be implemented for AI model governance? What makes sense? And the funny thing is you might say, well, Michael, would they really say office policies as an answer? And it's like, sometimes the questions are that simple, actually. Remember, this is a foundational exam. So in this particular case, you might look at these answers and say, well, do we need version control? Kind of makes sense. Do we need hardware tracking? Maybe, maybe not. Building rules, that's a little vague. Audit logging, logging is always good. And then office policies. So like, even if we didn't know, we could kind of rule out probably maybe hardware tracking and office policies. But if I were to take a guess, it's probably version control and audit logging. Let's take a look. So in this particular case, there's several features that you probably want to follow when you are governing a model. Definitely logging how the model is evolving and how you got there is important. And having a version control, which in a sense is a form of auditing, is super important, because if you run model A and then you run model B and you run model C and you get different results from all 3 of them, how are you going to know which model version you were running at the time that you got the results, right? So that's an example of what you will see on the exam. Here's another question, and notice that immediately we're in Bedrock. Like, we're right there. Now, this question is deceptive because what they're doing here is they're basically checking to see if you know about a feature in Bedrock and what it's called. And so once again, this is the easy set of questions. So, we're kind of building your confidence. And so you can probably look at this and say, well, I don't know about RAG in Amazon Bedrock. Do we know what retrieval augmented generation is, right? It's basically a database, right? It's a knowledge base. So if you know that, then you probably already know that it might have something to do with knowledge base configuration. And since technically it is actually a vector store, it kind of makes sense that this might be the answer. But I could be completely wrong. Let's check it. And so note that just by knowing what RAG is and knowing that what the feature is in Bedrock, I can reason and deduce that it's probably about knowledge bases. And since it's already a vector store, that's probably the answer. Now, we probably could have also excluded the answers, because I'm pretty sure it's not office documentation, not hardware specifications or physical storage, but that knowledge helps you. I think the other thing is that how should long-running tasks be implemented? So sometimes they're going to ask you questions about not the technology, but the process that goes with the technology. A little bit about architecture in a sense. Like, for example, if you have a task that's going to run for 3 or 4 hours, do we want to run that task and then stay connected with it the entire time? And just make sure, like, for example, if we're running a task, do we want to stay connected with the task? And if we lose that connection, do we want the task to fail or have a problem? Or do we want to take the task and just push it out to the system and say, hey, just run this. I'll either check back on you, or you can send me a notification when you're done. And that idea of putting a task on a system and just letting it run versus staying connected with a task, awaiting a response, those concepts are the difference between synchronous processing and asynchronous processing. And so I've kind of given the answer here. And again, I could be completely wrong about this, but manual processing, just to say this, will never be the answer on any AWS exam. I say never. Maybe there might be a rare exception, but 99% of the time, AWS will never accept manual process, manual work as the answer, because AWS wants you to automate as much as possible, and they want you to automate with them. They are running a business, so when you get to automate with them, you use them more, they make a little bit more money. Like, it's a win-win for the customer as far as operational offloading. It's a win-win for Amazon. So based on what I said about synchronous and asynchronous processing, it's probably this, but let's see. So that's how a long-running task gets implemented.
So that's a very generic kind of concept, right? But
Yeah.
Are they asking this here because is there a way to run synchronously and asynchronously for these models that you've mentioned, or the services that you've mentioned?
Absolutely. Since a lot of our interaction with LLMs from an enterprise level is through code, they want you to know that you can call things synchronously, or you can call things asynchronously. You can call things in one at a time, or you can give them a whole batch of things that you want the system to do. So it does test somewhere your fundamental knowledge around how you can interact with these services. And so it's an option.
Okay.
So this is the simple set. And I want to be mindful of time. So I'm going to roll over to the hard set just to give us a taste of what hard looks like. So these first two exams, is that okay? Or is there any questions? I haven't seen the chat, so I'm not sure if there's other questions there.
So there are a few questions that we can take, but let's go through the hard ones, and then maybe we'll leave the last few minutes.
Okay. All right. So here we are. So notice instantly we went from easy to hard, and whoa, right?
Yeah.
We now have a lot. So let me walk through it. So this question basically is asking you to arrange the following steps in the correct order to assess and basically like fix bias using SageMaker Clarify. And I just want to point out, Clarify is a subservice of SageMaker throughout a machine learning model's lifecycle, right? And so notice that we have sets here about what you can do. And so, you know, the funny thing is that you're going to have this level of question that just pops up in addition to that very simple level of question that pops up on the AI Practitioner exam. It's probably worth mentioning that unlike Cloud Practitioner, which is really just a series of simple questions, the AI Practitioner exam does this, where it's like simple, 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 boom. We just got a big question. So just know that if you run into a big question on the exam, it probably is legitimately a scoring question, and it does happen. So here, for example, what are the steps to assess and mitigate bias using SageMaker? We kind of have to know a little bit about the machine learning, MLOps workflow that AWS likes to use, and you'll study that as you go through it. But it's like, okay, do we want to train the model and then use SageMaker to clarify the training set? Do we want to evaluate the model and then deploy the model using, basically all of this to detect bias? So what they're doing here is they're saying, when do you use Clarify to detect bias so that you can fix it? So I'm just going to pick one because I don't want to spend too much time doing analysis, but you would normally take 2 or 3 minutes to look at this, right? And so, for example, in this particular case, SageMaker, we're going to analyze the training data set. So we're going to look at the data set before we actually train the model. Then we're going to train the model, which makes sense. That follows the MLOps lifecycle exactly. And then we're going to evaluate the model's predictions, and we're going to use SageMaker to check and make sure that there's no bias from those predictions. And then we're going to deploy the model, and we're going to make sure that SageMaker Clarify is continuously monitoring to detect drift in bias as that model is running. And so that's the kind of thing you want to know. Now, I will mention also is that for the hard questions in particular, we have added full explanations along with documents. There's some of that for the longer questions inside the easy set, but it pretty much always happens inside of the hard set. So now you can see exactly why that order was chosen, and there's references to the official AWS documentation about what to look at.
So there was a question from Shreyashi. She's asking, like, what are the best ways to detect bias?
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of ways to approach it inside of AWS. The official and best answer for almost all the exams is to use Clarify, basically, to detect bias. Now, obviously, when you're doing exploratory data analysis on your own using whatever tools you're using, before you even get to SageMaker, you can look for bias in your features. But Clarify is the service, the subservice of SageMaker that is almost always recommended to actually look at both the training data set, what the model is doing once it's kind of been trained, and then what the model is doing once it's live and it's continuously answering and making predictions. So there's 3 phases by which you can use Clarify. Clarify can look at what data you put in. Clarify can look at how the model was trained post-training. And Clarify can keep an eye on the model as it's running, because one thing you'll notice is that a model will decay in production over time as it encounters newer and newer data that it hasn't seen before. So that's typically Clarify is the answer for detecting bias. Let's do one more really quick and then we'll move on. Okay, so when implementing a foundational model application with Bedrock, which approach allows you to build interactive agents that can perform multi-step tasks by basically invoking APIs and services based on user instructions. So once again, they're testing to see if you know if there's a feature that does this in Bedrock, like a subservice. And the answer is that Agents for Bedrock is the subservice for basically doing interactive agents. And they have Core Agent and a couple of different flavors that have come out in the last little bit. But Agents for Bedrock is actually the subservice that you would use for anything around interactive agents in Bedrock. So if you don't want to just deploy a model, but you want an agent or a group of agents, you're going to use Agents for Amazon Bedrock to define that. So just know that the questions, just continue to get a little bit more engaged here at this point. There's other questions here, although that looks like a mistake, so I'll have to note that, right? Streaming service, we'll fix that. And just know that the questions just continue, but notice that we've been mainly asked about Bedrock and we've been asked about SageMaker. Those are the primary things that we've been asked about. This is in the course. Obviously, we're in free week, so you can literally go and take a look at this today, right, if you want to. And I would recommend highly, looking at the course structure, and then if you want to just dive into some of the exams and, just test your knowledge, the easy assessment is a great place to start, just to see how well prepared you might already be to take the AWS Certified AI Practitioner. Okay.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks for walking us through that.
Yeah.
There are a few questions, so maybe we can just go over some of them. So Mohammed asks, will we use Bedrock to integrate with other agents to call for services? I'm guessing the question is, how do you integrate it with other services in AWS?
So what's interesting about running agents using the agent subservice for Bedrock is that it actually has access to services as long as you've given it permissions. So like if you want it to call EC2 or Kubernetes on AWS, you just need to make sure it has the right permissions and it'll just do it actually. You can orchestrate that manually if you want to using any of the AWS SDK. But for the most part, you can actually just make sure the agent has access, and you can just tell the agent, hey, go look at this particular EC2 instance and talk on port, blah, 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 and it will actually just connect with the system itself. It is amazingly sophisticated.
Pretty cool. Okay. So we have a kind of a generic question. What's your approach to retaining all the information from vast courses across various domains, and even after exams, how to retain the info as too many changes nowadays, everyday new AI concept, and so on? The AI has been a pretty fast, and it hasn't been able to kind of catch up. I know that I can totally understand that. But generally for me, it's always been just doing, right? Like to me, I just cannot retain information just by reading about it or just by learning. I have to do it, right? And I try and spend as much time as possible getting my hands dirty and doing things. So to me, that's how I try to retain information. And then kind of hack yourself into committing for some projects, or taking up projects at your workplace, or getting involved in something that you want to gain that exposure to, and that kind of forces you into like learning and contributing to that project. And of course, I'm a learn by doing guy, and I think the more you do, the more you retain. That's how I retain.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what a great question, because it is a problem. Like it is a challenge consistently, like throughout the decades. It's just a challenge. And I would say it's a bigger problem now because AI has reinvigorated the creation of new frameworks, new tools, new things, in addition to the stuff that we already had. So I completely agree with that, Mumshad. I will tell you that I spend at least a little bit of time every day, both studying information and running things, right? And so you have to, because otherwise you can't keep up. I will say this though, is that I'm a big fan of kind of this inverted T shape as far as like skills, meaning you maintain a base level of knowledge about a couple things. And I love your suggestion. pick something or a couple of things. I would say no more than 3 that you want to be really good at, and focus on those, and make sure you spend time every single day either doing it or at least reading an article on it, but preferably doing it so that you can actually do stuff with it. But I'm a big fan of focusing on 2 or 3 things and have that be like a constant thing. So that way you don't have to know everything. You just know a little bit about a lot of things, and you know a lot about a few things.
Yeah. I think along those lines, Shubham has another question. So how to integrate AI in DevOps or SRE journey? Still guessing more around the learning side of it, but also probably how you would use AI in your day-to-day.
Yeah. I have an opinion on this in that I think that AI is going to be part of every single workflow we have. If not today, in the next 18 months to 3 years, 100%. And I would say that I'm writing more code, managing more systems, and doing more things with AI than I ever have in my entire career. So how to integrate AI? Just start using it either as an ad, like on the side with your tasks, like, and especially if you have it do something for you, have it teach you what it's doing. Like if it spins up a Kubernetes cluster for you, don't just take it at face value. Have it teach you what it did. Have it comment its code. Have it walk you through every bit of Terraform or whatever it is that it did for you, but use it. Like use it to do things and fold it into your workflows, because it is invading everything. And we have courses on Cloud Code. We have courses on Copilot. Like if you want to learn how to do any AI-assisted DevOps or programming, we have courses on it. Feel free to dive into those, because you should be using, ideally, just to say this, Cursor or VS Code enabled with extensions or Warp Terminal or Cloud Code. You should, ideally, you would be using those.
Yeah. So there's a lot of use of AI in our in the way that we kind of interact. So like how you would use AI to code better in the DevOps and SRE world. We naturally use AI to kind of build clusters, or put things together, troubleshoot issues, assess a situation, all of that, and that it's gotten really good at that recently. But beyond that, what about AI within either the workflows or I don't know, CI/CD pipelines, things like that? Is that something? Is that a trend that we're seeing?
It seems like almost every vendor, like I'm going to pick on like Grafana, for example, which does dashboarding. It seems like almost every vendor has injected AI into their product. Even Kubernetes, by the way, has just done releases on GPU scheduling, and we've got KGPT, we've got K-Agent. There's all these services now that run in and on top of Kubernetes. And of course, people are writing all kinds of things like MCP servers and tooling. So I would say that you kind of, in a sense, don't have to worry about it, because it's all being injected into the tools that you're using. Ansible has Lightspeed, which is AI enhanced Ansible. Even Jenkins has plugins now that you can throw in. GitLab has Duo, which is their AI agent that runs inside the CI. So I think you're just seeing it kind of everywhere, frankly.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. All right. I think we're at the end of our time. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, and thank you, Michael, for joining us today. And if you have additional questions, feel free to reach us. Definitely join the cohorts, and of course, just a reminder that this free week happening for the next at least 5 more days. So definitely check out KodeKloud and all the free courses available. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and see you next time.
All
right.